My name is Sebastian Matus, and I want to talk about the document object model, which represents the structure and the content of a web page. Then through it, we can have access to manipulate the HTML document. The DOM is not part of JavaScript; it stands for its own, and it's in the middle between the HTML source code and the JavaScript, which is the programming language we use to 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 write behaviors. And the DOM can get for us the elements, can get to us the content within the web page, and then we can make changes to those elements and the content. So the DOM is the programming interface for web documents, and the DOM has its own structure, which is like a family tree, and each HTML element here, or each element here, is called a node. Nodes are not just restricted to HTML elements. White space can be nodes. Text content also can be nodes. So nodes is more than just HTML elements. And we have here the structure, which the HTML node element here represents the root the root node or the root element, and then the head and body represents the the child of HTML. So the head is a child of HTML and is the sibling of both. And also the head has its own children, the title, link, and meta. The same as the body has also its own children, and so on. So we can have the parent nodes, we can have sibling nodes, we can have child nodes, and we can have one that's interesting, the leaf nodes, which represents those nodes that cannot have this hierarchy, of this family hierarchy. Like the text, for example, the text content cannot have siblings or child or parent. So the text is just a text, and these kind of nodes are called leaf nodes, the same as white spaces. So we can access and modify HTML elements using some method. So we can, for example, we have here the get element by ID. So we access the HTML element using the ID written in that HTML. We can get elements by class name. So we get elements using the class name defined in that element. The same as the get elements by tag name gets us elements to the tag name of that element. So we can have this method to get the access to the HTML elements. But yes, we have more than just three methods. And then after getting the access to that HTML element, we can give some properties. We can then modify, we can then manipulate the element that we got access to. So we have, for example, we can change the inner HTML, we can change the style, or add event listener to listen to whenever an action happens, to listen to whenever some changes happen in the client side, in the user side. So let's see this in action. Let's say we have this web page, so it's very simple and there's nothing interesting in it on it. So now we have these paragraphs and we have these headings. So let's say we want to change colors of this. Let's see how can we get access and do some changes on it. So let's say I want the first paragraph. So I say I declare a variable for that paragraph, and then to get the access to any HTML element, or to get access to any node within the DOM, I have first to call the DOM here, and then using the dot notation I say which method I want to use. So here I'm using the get element by ID. Here is the get element by ID, and then I provide that argument, which is the ID of that HTML element, and then now I have access to that HTML element, but nothing has changed here. We can see that the first paragraph is as default. So let's say we want to change the color of this. Now we can say paragraph 1, and then we want to change the style, and then the color property of the style, and then we can say we want this paragraph to change to blue, and then we save it, and we take a look. Now the first paragraph is blue. So this is how we can have access to an HTML element. So using the document dot the method we want to use to get access to that, and then provide the argument parameters. In this case is the ID, and after that we can do any changes we want to. Of course it could be more interesting, not only changing the color, but doing whatever you want to do. So let's see the get element by class name. So the get element by class name, let me comment here. Okay, I have here the get element by class name. Okay, let me comment the first method so that we don't mix up things, and let me comment this last one. So if I get back to the web page, nothing changed yet. Now I have the access to the heading, and I see that the argument is heading 1 and 2. And if I go here in the HTML page, I can also see that I have the paragraph, the heading 1 and 2 here, and the heading 1 and 2 here. So both headings have the same class. So let me get back to JavaScript and then comment this, save it, and I see that only the first heading has changed the color. This is because we are using an index to show which heading to change, since the get elements by class name retrieve an HTML collection, and we have to say which element we want to make changes to. And it's a zero based index, so the 0 indicates the first element and of that list or array, and the 1 represent the second. In this case we have just 2. So, and then we have what? Then we can have get elements by tag name. I'm not going through it. It's very similar to get elements by class name. It also retrieves a HTML collection. The one that is interesting is the query selector. The query selector, let me see if I comment it. I'm gonna comment you. Got back here, everything is normal. So the query selector, it uses any argument and CSS declaration. So using the CSS declaration, we can make change. We can get access to that element. So here, for example, I'm using the class. How do I know it's a class? There's a dot here in the very beginning of the argument test. So the dot represent class. So this is the paragraph 1 and 2, both of them. So they have this class, and I can of course change the color of that uh, paragraph. So if I come here and I see paragraph 1 and 2, go to HTML, I have paragraph 1 and 2 in this second paragraph, and in the first paragraph both of them have the same class, but here we did not show the index. We did not tell where to go to change, where to make change in the first or another one. But this is because the query selector, it applies only for the first element it encounters in the DOM structure. So the first element it finds in the DOM structure, it applies those changes to that element, and all others are not touched. And then if we wanted to select all the element, of course we could use this select all to make those changes. So it retrieves also the HTML collection, so we have to tell the index and make changes. And we have access, and we can create elements using the DOM. So here we have we got the UL, the unordered list, all the unordered list in the DOM structure. So we have of course more than just one. We have this first list here, and then we have this second list, and then the third list. We have 3 lists, so we want to get all of them. Of course we are getting in HTML collection. So now what are we going to do is we get access to that element, we create a new element, a new item, in this case a list item. So using the create element method, and then we append that new item, new element, that created element, we append that in the list here, or in the HTML element I want to. It becomes the child of that element. In this case it's very clear, the UL has as a child the LI, so the LI is going to be appended as a child in the UL list, and we can see this here. So I've said, oh, now I see a dot here which represents the a new LI in there. And of course we can add event listeners. Event listeners are very common using the DOM. We use the event listeners to make changes whenever something uh, changes, and then we introduce some kind of behavior in there. So the idea is we get access to a certain element. In this case is a button. We can tell it because of the class name, the ID name here. So we have the access to the button, and what can we do with that? So with that button here, the variable declared button btn, we add an event listener, which is the click event. So whenever a click happens, we want to change the background, and the background is a function defined up here, and all it has to do is within it here in the change background function. So with that we can make changes. So if we save this and go to the page, the very bottom we have the button here, and you see change color. Now we can change the color.